As Canada continues to pivot away from our closest neighbor, Prime Minister Mark Carney is about to jet off again to look for other alliances, this time in China. It's the first visit there by a Canadian Prime Minister in more than 8 years, but there are calls for extreme caution. Global's senior political correspondent David Akin will be on the Prime Minister's plane and joins us with a preview. David, thanks so much for your time. All right, what is expected on this trip next week?
Well, the Prime Minister is going to be in Beijing for 3 to 4 days, and the details are still sort of be worked out. We tend to get those on the plane as we're traveling to Beijing, but certainly he's going to meet the Premier of China, and we expect he's going to meet the President of China, Xi Jinping. The first and top objective for any Canadian Prime Minister right now with China is to resume canola sales, Canadian canola, to China. It's a big, that's what a lot of canola farmers in Western Canada, they depend on the Chinese market, and the fact that China right now is boycotting Canadian canola because we're boycotting or essentially freezing out Canadian or Chinese electric vehicles, that's a big issue. Will we see Carney come home with a canola deal? I've been told to sort of tamper down expectations. Yeah. There may be frameworks toward that, but that I think is going to be one of the chief things reporters traveling with the Prime Minister are going to be looking for is relief on the canola boycott.
Yeah, a lot of people in Saskatchewan will be happy about that if that comes to pass. The last time one of our prime ministers visited was way back in 2017, and relations froze after the two Canadian Michaels were detained. Have things changed between Ottawa and Beijing?
Yeah, and I was on that trip. That was Prime Minister Trudeau 8 years ago. And in fact, I was in China with Prime Minister Harper twice. And every time the relationship is either freezing or thawing. Right now it's on the thaw. Certainly Prime Minister Trudeau, when he went there 8 years ago, he had just sort of come into office. He was there a couple of years, and he was going to, good faith. China's got to be one of the world's partners, and he was ready to increase trade, increase people-to-people ties. And then we had the detention of the two Michaels, many cases of foreign interference by agents of China in our electoral system, and other matters. The attack on the Uyghurs by the Chinese government, and so on. And so relations absolutely froze by the middle of Trudeau's time. Mark Carney has decided it's time for a new chapter, and we'll see now we're on the thawing phase. And we had a poll out on the weekend that says Canadians are just there on time to thaw this relationship. 54% of Canadians said it was time to increase trade with China. That's from our pollster Ipsos. And when I spoke to Ipsos's Daryl Bricker, he said to me, don't take that as people are now back in love with China. Yeah. Take it in context of being frozen out in trade by the United States. And Canadians are saying, we've got to trade with somebody. And of course, China's our second biggest trading partner. So Carney knows that. Carney's mission is to diversify markets. China's of course, a huge market. What business can we do with China and yet protect Canada? I spoke with one of those two Michaels last week, Michael Kovrig. And Kovrig warns that China is into weaponizing economic dependence. It's kind of done that with canola. We need to sell our canola to somebody. China knows that they're the big buyer, and so they try to use that as leverage. So Kovrig's advice to Carney, and he has given advice to members of Carney's staff, is to make sure you don't put yourself in a position of economic dependence. Yeah. Be there, do some business transactions, but remember and try to uphold Canadian values.
So the Prime Minister has a lot on his plate for this trip to China. Where does he go after that?
Right, so it's a long trip that he's going to be overseas for. So after China, he's going to head to Doha, Qatar. It's the first time a Canadian Prime Minister has ever been to Doha. And this trip follows very closely on a trip he did at the end of the fall to the United Arab Emirates, so another Gulf state. And obviously the Gulf states have a lot of money, and Carney is looking for money to fund all sorts of infrastructure projects, so that's Doha. And then he finishes by going to Davos, the World Economic Forum. And in some political parts of this country, mostly the conservatives, they go, psst, when you hear World Economic Forum. But not for Mark Carney. This is really his milieu. Global movers and shakers, CEOs, people with a lot of money. And again, the Prime Minister, I'm sure he will say, I'm going there because it's very important to put Canada on the radar as an investment opportunity. So the Swiss Alps, Davos, that's where he finishes before coming back. And to be honest, coming back and getting right ready to bring back the House of Commons at the end of January.
Busy, busy man. Hey, thank you very much, David Akin, and safe travels.
Thanks.